Hi, I'm Tanya and welcome to today's video on shame-based families, what they look like, and what are some things you can do to break that cycle. Before we start though, I'd like to share the great news that my memberships are available now. So I'm going to leave the link in the comments below. And of course, as always, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. So let's get started. I want to go over the different characteristics that are in shame-based families. Now keep in mind, when I was doing my research, there are so many different characteristics. So I'm only doing 7 today. There's quite a few. I'm picking the ones that I feel that are most common, most predominant, and then I'm going to share a few different ways that you can shift and break that cycle. So the first one is control. Yep, that was probably an easy one to guess. And I want to explain it in a way that was explained in an article that I'm going to include in the comments section, where there's 2 different roles that are being played in a family dynamic. One is the perpetrator and one is the dependent. So you can guess the perpetrator is the one that is creating all the control, and they're using their power and their influence to control money, emotions, family dynamics, you name it. And this individual has a lot of narcissistic tendencies, so that they're overinflating the situation. It's all about them, and they're exerting this sense of dominance, this sense of dictatorship, and you just don't have any choice if you're the recipient of this. And so the dependent then has such low self-worth and this strong need for approval that they comply, because if they don't, it's not safe, right? So you might have been in this situation, whether it was family, work, friendship, and so with that comes that extreme people pleasing, and you kind of just put aside all of your needs because you need that approval from this dominant figure. And as I mentioned, this low self-worth, it really just destroys your sense of self, your spirit, your inner power, and your ability to trust yourself, which then has a whole ripple effect of you getting disconnected from what you want to be doing. So the second one is poor openness and poor interpersonal skills. Oh boy. The communication is basically, you're not good enough. Constant. There's no winning. There's always something wrong. There's always criticism, shaming, blaming. And so then the communication doesn't allow for understanding. It doesn't allow for empathy. There is no empathy. There's little or no support. And in order to express yourself, well, you can't. If you express a negative emotion, that perpetrator is going to take it personally and take it as a threat that you are questioning their dominance. And so then what ends up happening is you're silenced and you don't actually get to express or process any negative emotions. And then you might become flat or super fake and happy. Oh, maybe not, because then what's wrong with you? Why are you smiling? So you can't win. So on an emotional level, you can't express your emotions. You don't get support for them. And then as far as communicating goes, there's no win. And it's very aggressive, violent communication. And that doesn't always mean yelling. It could be lying. It could be, silent treatment. It could be passive aggressive, sarcastic tone. That is a form of violent communication. So the next one, and it kind of ties into the last one that I mentioned, is the dependence for self-approval and self-esteem. Because there's this kind of codependent relationship and this dependency and this need for approval, if you're a child, you want the approval of your parents. It's part of your survival. It's how our brains work. So if one of your parents is that perpetrator, you want that approval. And so you depend on their, yes, you're doing a good job. But if you don't get it, then you're deflated and you feel horrible about yourself. The other aspect is that you wanting to change has very little to do about personal growth and empowering yourself. It has to do more with avoiding failure because you don't want to get criticized. And so because the values are always changing, you can never be perfect. You can never be good enough because things are always changing and there's always criticism and why didn't you do this? And, how could you do that? And so again, there's this sense of avoiding mistakes. And if you avoid making mistakes, how are you going to grow? So I've seen this a lot in my life, not just with clients, where people kind of stay stuck. They really struggle financially. They're not able to develop their careers because they're so afraid of making a mistake, even if they're no longer living with their family. It was so ingrained in them. And there's so much fear around making a mistake that they can't do it. And so that makes life really hard to move forward. And I'm going to talk about how to develop that afterwards. The next one is selective personal accountability. I bet you've experienced this at some point in your life, even if you didn't grow up in a really dysfunctional family, where you see that some people just find a way to get out of things. It's, oh, well, you didn't tell me this, or, oh, no, I didn't do it because of this. And there's excuses. The rules are always changing. So if the rules change, no accountability for that perpetrator. And it's really this sense of it's okay for me, but not for you. And again, it's that perpetrator being like, I'm not going to take responsibility. It's on you. So I'm just going to blame and gaslight you. And that way I don't have to take responsibility. And so there's always this ongoing sense and this ongoing communication of criticism, shaming, and blaming. And of course, what do you think the perpetrator's home is going to look like? A mess, unless the dependent is literally cleaning up right behind them. And that's not just physical mess, that also means bills, that's administrative, anything along those lines. The next one I want to talk about is denial of 5 freedoms. So the freedom to perceive, think, feel, and imagine what you want to. What makes you you, really. And if you can't express those, well, what happens? Dissociation, people-pleasing, fawning, and just this complete disconnection from yourself, your intuition, your inner power, your soul purpose, because you cannot be you, because you have to comply. And so that is debilitating and very likely coupled with very severe depression. Not fun. So with that comes boundary violation. And with boundary violation, there's this constant demand of unreasonable requests that you can never meet. You are constantly being pressured and pushed, so you're not safe. And it's not really what you want to do. So that coupled with not being free and your boundaries being crossed, very likely your nervous system is in flight or fight mode, or even freeze, and you're never in ventral vagal. So you can never really act from a place of power, creativity, connection, and it's just constant survival. And so what happens when you become an adult? Well, that fear and that programming in your nervous system that you're not safe, it stays there. And your sense of self-worth doesn't all of a sudden magically, boom, go crazy up and you feel great as soon as you move out of that home that you grew up in with your family. So what are some things you can do to help shift that and help break that cycle of shame? Because likely you're still shaming yourself, and likely you're shaming others because it was just the form of communication, the means of trying to create change in others if things aren't working. So the first one is giving back the shame. And I must say, and I didn't write it down here, it is integral to get help. And that can be tricky depending on your financial situation, depending on who you're living with and if there's safety issues. Finding a way is key, because a lot of these exercises to do on your own It's not the same. A scale can't weigh itself, and I've probably said this in some of my videos, because in order to get back the shame, it's an exercise that you would do with a therapist or a trauma coach, where you're putting the shame back on the person who dumped it on you. Because the reality is, a perpetrator is filled with shame, and they don't want to feel it, so they're going to put it on you. All those tapes of the shame that was dumped on them by their parents and other people, now they're just dumping it on you. So it's giving it back to them because you didn't do anything wrong, and doing it in a way where you also can empower yourself and forgive yourself. And through that, that's going to help you to start to develop your self-worth. There's lots of different exercises you can do for self-worth, including self-care, getting support, doing things that you love. Gratitude journal in the way of yay me. Someone taught me this years ago, where they would do a list every night, and he would write the things that he did that were great that day. If you grew up in a shame-based family, how many compliments did you get? Like genuine, sincere compliments, not backhanded compliments. So you need to teach yourself, you need to train yourself in a way almost, that you have gifts and talents and that you're a good person and that there's nothing wrong with you. So the next one is accountability. Because it was this weird, messed up form of accountability in a shame-based family, you need to start looking at ways of, where am I going to genuinely be accountable? And how can I make that other person accountable for their stuff? How can I step back in a safe way where I cut that cord and stop enabling them, and I create a situation where they have to be accountable for their actions? And if I'm no longer around those people, how can I step up my own accountability? And then the last one, excuse me, is reconnect with your intuition. And I would say your inner trust as well. Our sense of intuition, inner knowing, inner power gets lost in a shame-based family. It gets destroyed. It's almost as though our spirit leaves the building and we're just blank. And to regain that takes time, just like the self-worth. They kind of go hand in hand. So what are different things you can do to strengthen that third eye, to strengthen that gut, to strengthen your heart chakra and create that connection between your heart chakra and your intuition? Does it mean going in nature? Does it mean connecting with other people who have a strong intuition and seeing how do they do it? There are lots of meditations that you can find online that help you strengthen your intuition. So this one is one that you can actually do on your own. And then as always, it's great to connect with others. So these are just a few examples. I'm going to leave the blog link in my comment section, where I'll have some more suggestions on what you can do to help release that shame and break that cycle. And as well, more details about the 7 characteristics, which is that lovely control that we see, the denial of the 5 senses, the poor communication and no empathy, the dependence on others, that accountability that's not consistent, the 5 freedoms, the no boundaries. You can break that cycle. You have to look within yourself and really go, I have the power, I have the choice, I can do this, and get that support and do different things to help release that shame and rebuild your power and your soul purpose. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and to check out my new monthly memberships, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.